Hi there, and welcome to Candid Conversation Zoomed in and Comments video channel. My name is Clip, and today we're going to touch on a very hot, really hot topic. And joining me on this zoomed in conversation is Charmaine Hammond. She is a conflict resolution consultant. She works with major companies to deal with conflict resolution, and she's here to talk about one of the biggest ones that is coming up in this year, which is, of course, the return to office. Oh my, this is a biggie, isn't it, Charmaine? It's a really huge issue.
It
Uh,
is.
are you getting a lot of calls for that?
We're seeing that this topic is coming up a lot in the training that I do for companies and teams, and one of the challenges is some teams have people who were always in office during COVID, and then they had some folks that were not in the office during COVID and are returning to work. We have some that are still working hybrid. So there's many different ways that companies have structured how their teams are working right now, but certainly is bringing up a lot of questions for people. One of the challenges we're seeing, which is really interesting and difficult for workplaces, is that in many cases, people were hired during the pandemic, so actually have not met their colleagues other than through platforms like this, Zoom and Teams. So there's a little bit of that relationship building that needs to be happening. And that's certainly one of the areas that people are looking at as a priority as well.
Yeah, that's definitely something that a lot of companies and CEOs want to see happen. They want to see that collaboration coming in, and
Exactly.
there's questions about making sure that the bottom line is met, and these are legitimate things.
Yes.
But there is some real interesting commentary that's going on out there. We can, for example, look at what Elon Musk referred to it as. He called it immoral. He referred to it as BS. And he said that people should get off the high horse, the moral high horse, regarding work at home during an interview on CNBC.
Mm.
That must make it difficult when you come across CEOs or people in leadership who have this kind of attitude, the kind of musky attitude. Um, Now, I will admit that I look at Elon Musk at this point, and he's no longer the darling that he once was. I mean, everybody's looking at him and go, meh. But he's still out there and he's making these kinds of comments. How do you react when you see that kind of thing going on, where that kind of statement is being made? How does that make your job difficult or challenging, or what? In other words, what do you do to try and address that kind of attitude?
Well, one of the things I'm going to answer this from a bit of a different way is that one of the things that happens in workplace conflict is that many disagreements and conflicts actually stem from differences in values, differences in beliefs, differences in priorities, and differences in needs. And we see that even when we talk about returning to work and what that means for one employee versus another, one leader versus another, or one company owner versus another, it brings up a lot of different belief systems. It brings up a lot of different values. And one of the things that I'm seeing that I'm really appreciating that some leaders are doing is I'm seeing a lot of leaders start to facilitate open conversations in their team, whether that be through a team meeting, for example, or whether that be through one-on-one meetings with employees. So an opportunity to answer questions, be able to dig a little deeper in terms of how people are coping with the changes in the workplace, but also what we call clarifying assumptions. One of the things that happens all the time in workplaces, but more so in COVID and the pandemic, is that there's a lot of assumptions that get made. And we build our assumptions from what we see in the media, from what we see on social media, from what we hear about sort of through the rumor gossip mill. And leaders right now, I'm hearing, are spending a lot of time correcting inaccurate viewpoints or assumptions, I should say. And so, what this has really taught us is the importance of that regular, ongoing communication. I'll give you an example. I heard one leader recently say, and I thought this was brilliant. They were really working on communicating regularly with the team, even if there was no update, even if there was nothing different, no changes. And the leader would say, things are going as per what we're calling normal right now, or as per our plan, and there are no changes. And what I liked about what this leader was saying through this regular communication is that he was kind of myth busting. He was reducing the assumptions, because when people don't know the answers, we sometimes make that up. As you know, we kind of go on assumptions, and again, it's based on what we see, what we hear, what we experience. So that's a really important element right now, is for leaders and company owners to be aware of what's kind of out there through different means, social media, media, and then correcting the information and bringing it back to what does it look like in our company? What is changing? What is not changing? And this helps create a little more stability in the company. And that's really important.
Yes, stability is the key thing. What kind of assumptions are out there that you think are the biggest ones that you're trying to help leaders address?
Oh, what a great question. So many assumptions. So one of the assumptions I hear a lot in some of the trainings I do and the conversations I have are things like, we might be getting our jobs cut. There might be a reduction in jobs. Another assumption, and there might not be any factual information, but when people kind of look outside their organization and see what's happening in their sector, they might draw assumptions about what that means for their company. Another assumption is that, and I'm hearing this one a lot, is everything's going to be different. Everything's going to be changing. And that's why I love it when leaders can let teams know what isn't changing, what is going to be the same. That is so helpful in creating that solid footing for people, reducing fears and increasing that feeling of stability. I guess another assumption that is happening is and I'm not sure if it's an assumption, maybe it's not an assumption, but I'm seeing a lot of companies struggle with old conflicts coming back up. So these are conflicts that might have happened long before COVID, long before the pandemic, but they're kind of bubbling up again. They're kind of being recreated. And part of the reason that happens is that when we have uncertainty or instability in our workplace or teams, often those old issues that might have been resolved start to bubble up. And leaders can use that as a clue, actually, as a warning sign to say, okay, what's really going on here? Why is this issue from 5 years ago popping up here today? And so the leaders that I'm seeing that are really navigating their teams in a healthy way through this return to work are those leaders that have open communication. They're making themselves available, or they're approachable to answer questions. They're letting people know what isn't changing as well as what might be changing. And they are really clarifying assumptions. So if they hear inaccurate information or some kind of an assumption, they're really quick to address that in the team so that it doesn't go on and on and on. It gets dealt with really quickly. So again, that stability is built.
Yeah, that's a critical thing. And one of the things, particularly in I work in the call center industry, and our call center took a pretty hard line. There's no hybrid work. There's no work from home. You have to apply for that. There are teams out there that do it, but this is the hard line. You come back to the office or your job's gone.
Right.
And there are people that are taking that kind of a hard line in other companies as well. Yeah. Is taking a hard line good, bad, or is it an indifferent kind of thing with respect to the work from home situation? And how do you mitigate the conflict in that?
Yeah. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Some companies chose that there is going to be no working from home or no hybrid. Other companies were able to, bring in hybrid or working from home. And I think what I hear from leaders that I talk to and employees is that it really often comes down to what is doable or what's best for the company. And so for example, what is the company able to best manage? What is best for the company? What is affordable? What is doable? What will best serve the clients or customers or consumers that that company or organization supports? And I can only imagine it was a lot of very difficult conversations and decisions for companies. One of the things with your question about kind of those hard lines, one of the things that's really important is that whatever decisions are made in companies, whether it's about this or something different, it's really important to think about the messaging that goes out to people. How are we conveying those messages? How are we conveying those decisions? Are we making sure that everyone heard the decisions? And I'll give you an example. When we hear that statement, I didn't get the memo, we hear, I didn't get
Yep,
that memo. I didn't get the memo. That's an
yep.
old one. It's been around since the days of those written memos that we used to give. But I heard that phrase used a lot from the beginning of the pandemic till even now, post pandemic. And when I kind of dig a little deeper, what I'm hearing that means is a lot of people, when we have different work environments, for example, if the way we communicated pre-pandemic was that we had a staff meeting and everybody was there and notes were taken, and if you missed the meeting, you got the meeting notes. Now there's a lot of meetings sometimes that happen. So there might be a team meeting, and then there's other kind of smaller group meetings. And sometimes information is not flowing to the people that it needs to get to, or in a timely way. And so people are feeling like they didn't get the memo. And
Mhm.
what can happen is trust can break down, communication can go sideways. People feel that they were left out of something when it was simply an accident. So I'm seeing a lot of leaders and human resource professionals having to navigate these really tricky conversations and work really hard at spending more time, energy, and focus on communication, making sure they do what I call cascading communication, which is, for example, you might communicate something at a staff meeting or a team
Mhm.
meeting, and then you follow up with, meeting notes so that everybody who may have been there or may not have been there has the summary of what was happening or what was decided, what was discussed. And then maybe another level to that cascading communication might be that the leader might go and do check-ins. Just talk to people in the team. Did you have any questions from what we talked about last week at the team meeting? They might bring it up the following meeting to just say, last week we talked about this, this, and this. Wanted to circle back to see if there were any questions, or anything we needed to dive a little deeper into. And that cascading communication style really helps break down rumors, remove some of the risk of those assumptions that are inaccurate. But what it's also doing is making sure that people are being delivered the information that they need at the right time.
Yeah, which is pretty critical because
Yeah,
this can get botched. I mean, I know that
yeah,
I think some companies have really done great at doing this. Others have been like, it's like the sad horns, wah, wah, wah. You did it
yeah.
wrong, you screwed this up, and now you got employees going, what is this, a circus? And they're walking. So how do you as a professional get companies set up for success in dealing with conflict
Mm.
and resolving things like the work return to office mandate? How do you start from uh, point A and get to point B?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the important factors here is training. One of the reasons why, and I've worked with so many people around the globe around conflict, and I've trained more than 500,000 people on these skills. And the number one thing I hear, whether it's in training or when I used to do mediation, when I would ask the question, what stopped you from having that conversation? What got in the way of actually talking to the person that you had the conflict with? People would say things like, I didn't want to make it worse. I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know how to get the conversation started. So I didn't have the conversation at all. And the good news is, all of those are trainable. Those are all things that we can provide coaching, training, skill development on to help people build confidence, build skills, and be ready to have these conversations so that they don't blow out of proportion or get confrontational or escalate to some other kind of conflict that's harder to deal with. So, training is one. Another one is leaders modeling healthy communication. When leaders model healthy communication and conflict resolution skills, that allows employees to learn by observing, to learn by watching. And another important element is to really spend time nurturing the team relationships. And what I mean by that is it might be team building. It might be looking at having regular opportunities to bring the team together for a meeting or conversation or something fun and social. But when we build team, we build trust. And when we build trust, it makes it easier for me to go to my colleague if I have a concern, if I have an issue, or if I just wanted to give them some feedback. And when we don't have relationship and we don't have trust, what people do is they avoid talking to the person who they have the issue with. They go around to either the leader, the HR, the company owner. And then that's where things get a little bit more complex and difficult to deal with. So training, mentoring, coaching, setting up really good communication skills, and having values that support a culture where it's expected that conflict be dealt with respectfully. Those are really important foundations.
It's when the people do things that are just off the hook on the, you know, on the floor. Even myself, I've made a mistake. I remember one time somebody was trying to tell me to do something, and I finally kind of snapped at them. And I said, "Go away." And that really didn't go over well. It's not really the way to handle it. It should have been like, please just leave me alone for a little bit. Let me try and figure this out, as opposed to go away. Um, and those are the kinds of things that you would probably train, right? As far as what you would do in your sessions with people.
Yes, and you raised such an important point, and I think we've all been there. We have all been there when our emotions get the better of us and the words come out of our mouth before we've really thought through what we want to say, and then we're trying to kind of pull those words back. We've all had those moments, and emotions are one of the things that cause us to be reactionary. And so, one of the things that we teach people in our trainings is how to manage their emotions in uncomfortable times. For the majority, I would say the majority of people that I talk to, conflict is uncomfortable. You know, it's messy, it's bumpy, it's uncomfortable. And so when we're uncomfortable, we're working often so hard to be comfortable. And it's a lot of work that we're doing. And so when we teach people how to manage their emotions, how to what we call regulate their emotions, what happens is they can slow the process down, first of all. So when we slow that conversation down, it's like when I worked in the correctional system and I was a correctional officer, we spent a lot of time in training as staff just how to slow the conversation down, how to de-escalate some of the emotions. And it was often easier to do that for other people. We had to do that for ourselves as well, because if I wasn't regulated, if I wasn't calm and centered and grounded, I would run the risk of saying something that I needed to pull back, and it could inflame the situation. So, really learning to pay attention to what irritates us, we call those our triggers. You know, what are the things that get under our skin? For some people, it might be when you say something and they go, you know, big eyeball roll in a side. That might be a trigger for someone.
Yes.
For somebody else, it might be you never, you always, you didn't, you couldn't, you should have. The you word can feel inflammatory for some people. So paying attention to what your triggers are, that's a great first step, because when you're aware of it, you're less likely to be reactive about it. And the second part is when somebody, and this is the hard part, when somebody does approach you and says something that doesn't land well, it irritated you, or it felt accusatory, what we really want to do is just slow things down. For, I call it the 3-second rule. Sort of like take a breath, let your brain and your mouth kind of work in tandem instead of our mouth jumping ahead and saying something that we didn't think through. And sometimes, rather than making a statement, it's more about asking an open-ended question. Oh, I'm curious about why you would say that. Tell me more. So instead of reacting to what they've said, we ask a question, because a lot of times when people are distressed or frustrated or nervous or uncomfortable, what they mean to say is not what they actually say. So often the person approaching you might say something in a way that that's not what even they meant to say. And now they're trying to take that back, and we're trying to take back our reaction. If you do have time, so let's say it's not an in the moment conversation like you just described, it's you have to have a conversation with someone tomorrow or next week.
Yep.
That's a great opportunity for you to prepare. And in our training programs, we actually teach people a process to prepare, to practice what they want to say, because when we get uncomfortable, we often forget. what we want to say, and we kind of stammer around in the conversation. It gets awkward. And so that preparation and practicing what we want to say helps people be more confident and more ready.
Ah, okay. So it's a lot about preparation, checking yourself so you don't wreck yourself, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, um, taking a pause and just listening and, watching your body language, I'm sure is also important too.
You
Um,
got it. You just listed off like a whole checklist that's super important in communication and conflict resolution.
yeah, it's just kind of like, okay, I know that's one of the things we learned when I was at TTC. I was a contractor with Great
Mhm.
Connections, and they taught us how to stand, how to look, how to, not look in any way, shape, or form as threatening, but to
Yeah.
have a posture that was very neutral. But also to be defensive in the sense that you're protecting yourself. You're not going to let somebody kick you in the,
We're going to
the
be
groin
safe.
area.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to be safe, but also you want to be um, careful in everything that you do, and even your speech, like you say, slowing it down a little bit,
Mhm.
talking in not simple words, but in smart, straightforward words that are
Yeah.
not too complicated, and at the same time just flow nicely. And even lowering your voice and tone kind of helps, because then you have more, not so much of a monotone or sing song or high, but just a, not even a flat, but just a little above a flat line
Mhm.
voice. So those are things that I think really do work in conflict resolution. How do
I
people get started with your company? What's the path for this kind of work to go and get this kind of training?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. A lot of times people have either heard me speak and they come and approach me either there, they've seen me at a conference or in another training session and they talk to me and email me. Sometimes people find us by Googling. So they Google conflict resolution trainers or conflict resolution speakers, and our name turns up. I've been doing this for almost 30 years now. So been
Mhm.
doing this a long time. And I think if people want to work with me, the best thing to do is go onto our website and charmainehammond.com and just reach out, and then we can set up a call, because it's really important when we're working with companies. We really want to get a handle on what are some of the struggles that they're trying to help people move beyond. So what is the training that they need? Maybe this is a group that's actually taken some communication skills training, so they've got a good foundation. Now they really want to use conflict resolution training. Maybe it's a company that has done no training ever on communication or conflict. And so we're going to be starting at the beginning with them. And because a lot of people are uncomfortable with conflict, obviously going into a training course about conflict resolution can even put them in a higher stress level. So we really work at from the very beginning, having people be comfortable with me. So a lot of times companies will say, can you pop into a staff meeting the week before the training? That way people just know who you are, and they've said hello to you before the training. And so there's all different ways that we do that. Sometimes it's an introduction letter, a video I send to the group that I'll be doing training with. And sometimes the group doesn't need that at all. They're just ready to dive in and are ready to go when we get started.
That's perfect. Um, Obviously, it sounds like you've had quite a dynamic career working in corrections and media, obviously, as well as mediation and conflict resolution. What what's the what's the aha moment for you when you're doing this, as
Mm.
far as you're training people? Are there aha moments that you take away as well when you're doing this work?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. I learn every time I do a training. I must say that what I love about training is every group I work with is different. It's
Mhm.
different people, different challenges. So I learn from people. The big aha for me, right from the beginning, even when I was a correctional officer, is that when when we can communicate in a safe place, in a respectful way, and use those skills that you just mentioned a few minutes ago, listening, being grounded, it's incredible how conflict can be resolved. And when I used to mediate, I would see people that were so angry and upset with each other that they could hardly get in the same room together.
Mhm.
They were just that upset. They didn't want to talk to each other. They wanted to talk through me and have me be the communicator. But
Mhm.
when they were provided with an opportunity where there is the mediator being impartial, where there's absolute safety for people to be able to say what's on their mind in a respectful way, where they're being heard by the person who they're in conflict with, all of that together can really help people start to navigate their own conflicts. And I remember, I can't even tell you how many times as a mediator, people would come in really angry and upset. And through the conversations and through these little steps forward together, it was almost like they were needing me less and less in the room because they were now talking to each other.
Mhm.
They were now listening, hearing that they each have a different perspective. And that's
Yeah.
probably the big aha is that so often people see themselves as so polarized. I'm over here and you're over there. But at the end of the day, often what they want or need is the exact same thing. They're just saying it differently. And when that happens, when that kind of aha moment happens for people in conflict, it's incredible to watch how quickly solutions can be put in place and trust can be rebuilt and relationships can be restored.
That's really an important point, and I think that's where we're going to leave it today. If people want to reach out, you mentioned your website as the main channel. Is that the main place that people want to go to get in touch with you to begin the process?
Yeah, I think CharmaineHammond.com is a great place. You can also find me on all kinds of social media. LinkedIn, I'm very active on as well. So a lot of people actually find me through LinkedIn first before they go to the website.
That's perfect. Well, Charmaine, really nice to talk with you today about this. This has been an interesting conversation, and I wish you all the success as you continue with your work. And I thank you very, very much for tuning in. We'll get this up on our channel, zoomed in, and comments. This is Candid Conversations. My name is Cliff. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.